Story number 1. I've always been drawn to the places people forget. Crumbling gas stations. Abandoned train depots. Long-dead mining roads choked with dust and silence. There's something about the desert, how it swallows time and hides the bones of civilization in plain sight, that makes me feel more alive. So, in the fall of 2021, I took a few days off and drove out to the desert near Kingman, Arizona. My plan was simple. Hike. Take photos. Maybe map a few unmapped mine shafts, just for fun. I wasn't expecting danger. Maybe something eerie, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. The weather was perfect. Mid-60s during the day, crisp and cool at night. Not a single cloud in the endless blue sky. I had my topo maps, 2 GPS units, snacks, water, first aid, satellite phone, and my GoPro mounted to my chest rig. I'd read about an abandoned copper operation out west of town. It barely appeared on any maps. No paved roads led to it. Just faded ATV trails and dry washes that wound through ancient rock and stubborn desert scrub. I parked where my SUV could still turn around and started hiking in. About an hour later, I found the first shaft. It was partially covered by an old wooden grate, brittle with rot, but wide enough to tempt someone as curious, and maybe as foolish, as me. I circled the edge, found a patch of solid rock with rusted rebar anchors, and rigged my rope. Then I lowered myself into the shaft, maybe 15 feet down. Not too deep. The floor was compacted dirt, littered with forgotten tools. Rusted picks. Metal buckets. The skeletal remains of a wooden sled, eaten away by time and termites. But that's not what stopped me cold. What made me freeze were the footprints. They were fresh. Someone else had been down there. Not days ago, hours, maybe less. The dust was too cleanly disturbed. No scuffs like my heavy boots would leave. Just narrow, clean impressions. Flat treads. Could have been a work boot. Or a woman's shoe. Hard to say. The shaft split into 2 tunnels. I stared into the one where the prints disappeared. And suddenly, my gut clenched. Not from caution, but from something deeper. Primal. Like every part of me, my skin, my blood, my nerves, was telling me to leave. I took a slow step backward. Then another. And that's when I heard it. A soft trickle of pebbles, shifting somewhere in the darkness of the mine. It wasn't much. Just the faintest sound. But it cut through the silence like a whisper behind my ear. Something was down there. Or someone. And they just moved. Not toward me. Not away. Just shifted. As if adjusting. As if they knew I was listening. I didn't panic. Didn't run. I climbed out, hand over hand, and stood at the rim of the shaft. My heart was racing, but my face was calm. I scanned the horizon. Nothing moved. It could have been another explorer, I told myself. Maybe someone passing through the night before. Possible. But unlikely. I hadn't seen a single other vehicle on the trail. No tire marks. No footprints. Just me, the shaft, and those fresh tracks in the dust. Still. I stayed there for 20 minutes. Just sitting on a sun-bleached boulder. Watching the rocks. The brush. Listening. And feeling something watch me back. Nothing moved. But the air felt too still. Too loaded. I decided that was enough adventure for the day. Marked the shaft on my map. Snapped a few photos from the rim. Then I left. That night, I camped in a narrow canyon about a mile away. The spot was beautiful, smooth sandstone, wind-carved ridges, and stars so bright they looked like frost on black glass. But the silence was different now. It wasn't peace. It was pressure. Like the desert itself was holding its breath. I kept telling myself I was just spooked. That the mind got in my head. That it was just the isolation playing tricks on my nerves. I boiled some water. Ate a rehydrated meal. Then tried to distract myself with something dumb on my phone. Static voices, bright colors, anything normal. Anything not underground. Just before bed, I decided to check my GoPro footage. And that was the moment everything changed. Shots of my boots. Dust. The edge of the shaft. Then, something else. Right at the moment I started backing away from those strange footprints, the audio on my GoPro glitched. Not static. Not wind. It was deeper, something almost wet. It sounded like breathing. Low. Slow. Controlled. But it wasn't mine. I rewound and listened again. Turned the volume up. There was no mistaking it. It was breathing, steady and measured, like someone was standing right beside me, but invisible to the camera. And just before the video cut out, right before the battery finally died, I heard one more sound. A footstep. Just one. Close. Too close. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time the wind stirred or a piece of grit tapped the canvas of my tent, my eyes flew open. I stayed alert, hand resting on the folding knife in my pocket, pulse in my throat. Around 3 a.m., I heard something outside. A soft scraping. Like sand dragging across taut fabric. Something brushing against the tent wall. I didn't move. Didn't unzip it. I just sat there, frozen in the dark, listening. Waiting. It never came back. The next morning, I packed up fast. I hadn't heard anything else, but the air felt wrong. Thick. Pressurized. Like something was just out of view, watching. I kept glancing behind me as I hiked. Not constantly, but often enough that I started to recognize the feeling wasn't caution anymore. It was fear. And it wasn't fear of a person. Or even some desert creature. It was the silence. Because it didn't feel natural. It felt like something was deliberately choosing not to be heard. Halfway back to my SUV, I took a wrong turn in one of the dry washes. Ended up somewhere I hadn't seen before. Another shaft. Smaller. I would have missed it if the sun hadn't caught the exposed timber just right. There were no footprints around it. No marks. No signs anyone had ever been there. But something made me stop. At the entrance, etched faintly into one of the old support beams, were 5 marks. 4 vertical lines. And one diagonal slash cutting through them. Like someone was keeping tally. Days, maybe. Or, people. I don't know how long I stood there staring. Eventually, I turned and kept walking. Fast. I reached my SUV by mid-afternoon, threw my gear in, and drove. Didn't stop until I hit pavement. Didn't look in the rearview. Just got out. A few days later, back home, I dumped all my footage onto my computer. I pulled up the mine segment again, this time with good headphones. The breathing was still there. But now, I could hear more. A faint metallic clink. Like chain on rock. Dragging. And right before the video cuts out, there's a shuffle, like something shifting its weight, or dragging one foot behind the other. But the worst part? The final 3 seconds. As I'm climbing out of the shaft, boots grinding against gravel, there's another sound. Buried deep beneath the crunch of stone and gear. A second pair of footsteps. Pacing mine. Perfectly in sync. I didn't find an abandoned mine. I found something else. And now, I think it wants me to come back. Story number 2. We were just two dumb college kids trying to escape summer classes. Kevin and I had planned the trip for weeks. He found some random patch of BLM land way out in eastern Nevada. No service. No fences. Just endless desert and sky. It sounded perfect. Peaceful. Uncomplicated. The kind of place where your thoughts could actually breathe. We left early on a Friday morning. Drove 6 hours from Reno with a cooler full of beer, gas station snacks, and a trunk full of gear. Our campsite was pretty basic. Just a couple of tents, a fire ring made from stacked rocks, and an old folding table Kevin brought from his garage. We set up before sundown. Cracked open a few drinks. Spent the evening watching the sky fade from gold to blue to black, then burst alive with stars. It really was beautiful. No wind. No bugs. No noise. Just that low, ancient hum of the desert at night. The kind of silence that lets you hear how loud your thoughts really are. We cooked hot dogs over the fire. Made fun of each other. Talked about dumb things, what we'd do if we found buried treasure, or stumbled on a crashed UFO. Kevin joked he'd sell it to the government for beer money. I told him I'd keep it and disappear. It was one of those nights you don't realize you'll remember forever, until later. Until it becomes the last normal thing before everything changes. Around midnight, we called it. Kevin said he was beat. I was too. So we doused the fire and crawled into our tents. Mine was about 15 feet from his. Maybe 20. Just enough distance to hear him if he talked, but not clearly. We left a flashlight between our tents, resting on a stump, in case one of us needed to get up in the night. Sometime later, an hour maybe, I woke up. At first, I thought it was a dream. That fuzzy, in-between place where your brain hasn't caught up yet. But I was awake. I knew I was. Because I could hear something. Movement. Footsteps. Not loud. Just soft crunches in the sand. Like someone trying not to be heard. I sat up slowly. Unzipped my tent just an inch and looked out. Nothing. Just the faint silhouette of Kevin's tent and the stars glowing overhead. I whispered his name. No answer. Then I heard it. A whisper. But it didn't come from Kevin. It was low. Muted. Like someone crouched outside his tent, speaking just beneath their breath. I couldn't make out the words. Just the tone, soft and deliberate. Like someone coaxing a scared animal. I froze. Just sat there, staring. My heart was thudding so hard I was sure whatever it was could hear it. Then, the sound stopped. Total silence. Like something holding its breath. I waited. A full minute. Then slowly, carefully, I lay back down. Eyes wide open. Listening to nothing. I must have drifted off. I don't remember falling asleep. The next thing I do remember, is Kevin screaming. I shot up and unzipped the tent fully. The world outside was glowing orange. Kevin's tent was on fire. The flames were high, snapping, twisting, and his silhouette inside was thrashing like he was fighting for his life. I ran barefoot, screaming his name. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed the side of his tent and yanked as hard as I could. The nylon tore open. Inside, Kevin was tangled in his sleeping bag, trying to crawl out. One leg was stuck. His arms were flailing. I dragged him free. His skin was red, blistering. His shirt had half melted onto his back. He was coughing hard, screaming, trying to say something. Words caught in his throat. I pulled him back from the flames and dumped what water we had left from the cooler over him. It hissed when it hit his skin. His hands were shaking so badly, I had to hold his water bottle and press it to his lips. We just sat there, trembling in the dirt, staring at the fire. The tent was gone. Just melted poles and a twisted black frame remained. I kept asking him what happened. Over and over. He kept saying the same thing. Someone was in the tent. At first, I thought he was delirious. Shocked. Burned. Out of it. But the look in his eyes. That wide, searching panic, it wasn't confusion. It was pure fear. He said he'd woken up and someone was standing over him. At first, he thought it was me. Then he saw the face. It wasn't you, he kept repeating. It wasn't you. I swept the flashlight around the camp. It only lit up so far, but I kept scanning the bushes, the sand, the horizon. I didn't see anything. No footprints. No gear. No shadows moving. But I didn't feel alone. Not even close. The hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up. Every time I turned the beam of the flashlight toward the dark, I expected to see someone, or something, just outside the light. We sat back to back until sunrise. Neither of us slept. Kevin whimpered off and on. I kept one hand on the camp hatchet, though deep down, I knew, if something came for us, I wouldn't be able to stop it. When the sun finally came up, we packed what we could. Kevin's arms were blistered raw. He couldn't lift anything. I drove us to the nearest hospital, an hour and a half away. He stared out the window the whole ride. Never said a word. Later that day, we gave a statement to the sheriff. They took photos. Logged the burn site. Promised to send someone out to investigate. But they didn't sound hopeful. Too remote. No cameras. No tire tracks. No shoe prints. When I mentioned the whispering, what I'd heard that night outside his tent, the deputy shrugged. Could have been the wind, he said. I almost laughed. Wind doesn't coax. Wind doesn't whisper your name. Kevin was never the same after that night. He dropped out of school that fall and moved in with his uncle in Montana. We kept in touch for a while, but he never wanted to talk about that night. Not once. I brought it up during a call. He hung up. A year later, he blocked my number. I don't blame him. He remembers more than he ever said. We thought we were alone out there. I think we were being hunted. Story number 3. It was supposed to be a quiet trip. I'm a field biologist. Most of what I do involves cataloging animal behavior, running environmental impact assessments, and being alone for long stretches in places most people don't even think about. Spring 2021 had me working a site along a winding stretch of oil access roads near Marfa, West Texas. Nothing but dry brush, cracked earth, and endless miles of unforgiving space. Perfect for observing wildlife. Terrible for relaxing your nerves after sundown. This particular week, I was setting up camera traps and acoustic sensors to monitor small mammal activity in some of the more remote desert corridors. I'd been out there 3 days already, long, sunburned days and colder than expected nights. But that was the job. You get used to the silence, the lack of signal. You stop missing voices after a while. I made camp on the third night near a dry wash about half an hour from the nearest pump jack. I picked the spot because it was quiet and flat, tucked between 2 low ridgelines. No cell service. No traffic. Not even the distant thump of a rig. Just me, the gear, and the wind. I pitched my tent before dark, made some instant ramen on the little propane stove, and sat on a rock, scribbling notes while the sky turned from gold to black. Before I turned in, I spent a few minutes stargazing. The desert sky out there looks like something out of science fiction, layered with stars in every direction, more than I could count. It's moments like those that remind me why I do this job. You feel small, but also grounded, like you're a part of something ancient and permanent. That's when I noticed it. A faint light, barely more than a glimmer, bobbing slowly out past the scrub. It was far, maybe 400 yards out, moving like someone walking with a flashlight. I figured it had to be another surveyor, or maybe a landowner checking wells. Not common this far out, but not impossible. I stood up, waved my headlamp to let them know I was there. They didn't wave back. The light didn't even flinch. It just kept floating along its lazy arc, then slowly dimmed until it vanished. 10 minutes later, it reappeared, closer this time. Same bobbing motion, like someone walking with rhythm. Still no reaction when I called out, "You good out there?" Silence. No engine, no dogs, no voices. Just that floating orb of light that should have made me feel safer, but didn't. After a few minutes of staring at it, the light disappeared again. I tried to laugh it off, told myself it was probably someone doing maintenance. Maybe a pipeline worker out for a midnight check. Could have even been refraction, or some rig throwing light through heat haze. I told myself that, zipped up the tent, and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Then the light came back. This time, the light was closer. Much closer. And it wasn't bobbing anymore. It just stayed still, pointed directly at the mesh screen of my tent. The brightness filled the interior like a spotlight. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I lay on my side, breath caught in my throat, clutching my multi-tool like it was actually going to help. I remember counting the seconds. I got to 300 before I lost track. The light never moved. It didn't flicker. It just stayed right where it was, dead center on the tent wall. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps. Just one or two faint crunches in the dirt and brush. But when I strained to hear more, there was nothing. I was so still that my arms began to ache from the tension. At one point, I debated yelling, just something to break the silence, to test if it would react. But something in me said not to. Then the light went out. Not like a beam shifting away, just gone. Like someone flipped a switch. Sleep wasn't even an option. When the sky finally started to turn gray, I sat up slowly and unzipped the tent. The desert was back to normal. Pale orange light spilled across the ridge. No flashlight, no footprints, no broken branches. I walked out a good distance in a circle. Nothing. Not even tire marks in the hardpan. Except one thing. About 30 feet away, in the exact direction the light had come from, I found a patch of dirt where the gravel had been disturbed. It looked like something had knelt there. The shape wasn't clear, but it looked intentional. I didn't linger. But the weirdest part came later. About a week after I got back home, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single item, a smooth gray rock. Nothing too strange, until I realized it was the same type of gravel used at that campsite. Not from anywhere near where I lived. I don't know how anyone would have known where I was, or that I had even left the camp early. I hadn't posted about the trip. I hadn't told many people where I was going. But the thought that kept gnawing at me was this. My license plate had been visible the whole time. Maybe someone had jotted it down. Maybe they ran it. You'd be surprised what someone can learn from a plate number if they know where to look. And yet, here was this rock, identical in weight and texture to the ones I saw beside that disturbed patch of ground. No note. No explanation. I packed up and drove to the ranger station the next morning. I told the guy at the desk everything. He listened, nodding, scribbling a few notes. When I finished, he tapped the pen twice and said, "We get those stories every now and then. Could be pranksters. Could be worse. I asked him what he meant by worse. He just shrugged. People out here sometimes disappear. Folks come out here to do things they don't want to be seen doing. That was the end of it. No one followed up. I've been in the field dozens of times since then. I've heard coyotes scream like babies and seen mountain lions stalk the edges of camp. But that light, so steady, so quiet, still haunts me. Because whatever it wasn't lost. It wasn't asking for help. It knew exactly where I was. And it didn't want to talk. Story number 4. It started as one of my favorite kinds of trips. Solo, quiet, and wide open. I was somewhere along the Arizona Strip, a remote patch of land between the Grand Canyon and the Utah border. No cell service, no nearby towns, just dusty roads. Endless scrubland and red cliffs that looked like they'd been carved by time itself. I had my truck loaded up with supplies, 2 weeks off work, and a plan to camp in silence for a few days before moving north toward Zion. I was craving stillness, not excitement. Peace, not interaction. The first night went exactly the way I hoped it would. I found a small clearing with a half-circle of rock formations shielding me from the wind. Set up my tent, made some soup on the camp stove, cracked a beer, and watched the stars come out. It was pure peace, the kind of quiet you don't realize you've been missing until you hear it again. The next morning, I noticed another vehicle parked a few hundred feet away. An older model truck, blue, beat up, looked like it had seen better decades. I was a little irritated, honestly. There was plenty of space out here, and I had picked that spot specifically because it was out of the way. Still, it's public land. I didn't own it. The man who stepped out was probably in his 60s. Wiry, sun-darkened skin, big white beard that looked like it belonged on a mountain man. More than a weekend camper. He raised a hand and gave me a polite nod. I returned it but didn't walk over. He didn't wave again. He didn't seem curious about me at all. Just nodded, then walked behind his truck to unload gear. He didn't set up a tent, just a tarp stretched between 2 stakes and a few plastic bins arranged neatly near a folding chair. No cooler, no firewood. By midday, I noticed something strange. He was digging, not a little fire pit, not a trench for runoff. A pit large, square, about 6 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide, and deep too. He was using a proper shovel, taking his time, not sweating it, just casually, methodically working like he was building something important. Curiosity won out, and I walked over. "You planning on burying treasure out here or what?" I joked. He looked up and smiled. One of those fake smiles. "Just in case I meet someone worth burying," he said. Then he laughed. It wasn't a cackling laugh. It wasn't even loud. It was just enough to make my skin crawl. I forced a laugh back, gave him a half wave, and walked away. Every instinct in my body wanted me to pack up and leave right then, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the guy had a twisted sense of humor. Maybe he was just messing with me. The rest of that day was off. I couldn't focus on reading or even enjoy cooking. I kept looking over to where he was camped, and sure enough, he was still working on that hole. He'd added a rough frame around it with wooden planks. That night, I lay in my tent listening to the wind howl, and something else. Metal on metal, like he was hammering something down. At one point, I unzipped my tent halfway and peeked out. His lantern was still on, glowing faint orange through the thin tarp. The silhouette of him standing next to the pit was clear. He wasn't digging anymore. He was just standing there, staring at it. The next morning, I debated packing up and leaving, but I talked myself out of it. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe it was just a weird guy doing something weird. Harmless. Harmless people say strange things all the time. That doesn't make them dangerous. That evening, I kept to my side of the clearing. I built a small fire, made some food, and tried to pretend he wasn't there. But I kept hearing small things, twigs snapping near my tent, faint footsteps just outside the firelight. Once, I swore I saw his silhouette standing on the ridge nearby, watching. When I turned my headlamp in that direction, it was gone. Just before I turned in for the night, I saw that he had covered the pit. He'd laid a blue tarp over it, secured with rocks. But the shape underneath wasn't flat. It bulged slightly, like something had been placed inside. I told myself it was just dirt. Maybe a way to keep the pit from filling with sand overnight. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of movement. Definitely not an animal, something slower, more controlled. Footsteps. I held my breath and listened. Someone was walking the perimeter of my tent. Not hurried, just circling. Then a pause, then another circle. I didn't move. Just waited, eyes wide in the darkness. My multi-tool was in my boot by the tent flap, but I didn't dare reach for it. At one point, I thought I heard digging again. A single scrape, then nothing. After what felt like an hour, the sound stopped. Just stopped. No retreating footsteps. Just gone. When morning finally broke, I climbed out of the tent, expecting to find the man standing there. But his camp was empty. Truck gone. No tarp, no pit, no sign he had ever been there, except for one thing. A patch of dirt where the pit had been, smoothed over but not clean. Something heavy had been dragged through the sand, leading toward the brush. I followed the drag marks for maybe 10 feet before turning back. My stomach was twisting. I didn't want to see what was at the end. I didn't waste a second. Just packed and bailed. No breakfast. No hesitation. I got in my truck and drove until I saw a highway sign. I reported it, gave coordinates, told them everything I saw. The officer on the phone listened quietly and asked if I had pictures. I didn't. I wasn't exactly thinking straight. He thanked me and said they'd send someone to check it out. That image stuck with me. The calmness. The smile. The way he chose that exact clearing despite having miles of open desert. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe he buried garbage. Maybe it was nothing. But I don't think so. He wasn't just preparing the pit. He was waiting to decide who to put in it. If wide open spaces and no cell signal sound peaceful to you, you haven't watched this channel enough. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and leave your survival tips in the comments. I read every single one. Some people go off the map for peace and quiet. Others go missing. Click now to watch 4 scary middle-of-nowhere horror stories. And maybe don't camp solo this year. Stay alert and stay safe.